I don't know.
There's a manhole right there at the
Ready?
end of the alley.
Sure.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Building Advisory Board for Wednesday, November 5th to order. Chair requests staff confirmation of the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes, I can confirm the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Okay, roll call, starting on the right.
Mark Frazier.
Charles Renz.
Ryan White.
David Holmgren.
Ben Winholz.
Okay, approval of minutes of the October 14th, 2025 regular meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes for October 14th, 2025.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? None. That passes. Okay, new business, public hearing items. Public hearing items?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm going to get you started today. Margie Clem, Deputy Director of Community and Development Services. Just wanted to thank you all for your support as we've been working through these building code updates the last little over 3 years and have gone through a number of those. Thank you to all of you current members, but as well as our past members as well. The department did hold a public meeting on October 29th to go over just some significant changes that have happened in all of these different code cycles going from 2012 to the 2018s. We did notification for that public meeting, both on the city's social media sites, as well as the notification list for the Building Advisory Board, the contractor continuing education list, and the contractor bid packet list. So those were provided. We did have around a dozen attendees, and we fielded questions and answers back and forth with them, talked through all those pieces. We also provided comment cards if anybody wanted to send an email or provide those in writing to us. We did not receive anything back from any of those attendees, and nothing in advance of that meeting from the public either. We did present a PowerPoint presentation at that meeting that is attached with the packet. We are not planning to go through that full PowerPoint today just because all of you were involved in different subcommittees and those were there. But we just went over those items that were already presented at subcommittee meetings as significant changes. So next steps for our code update process is we've drafted ordinances for adoption of the proposed changes for all of our codes. So we're going to today go through each of those code sections and just bring up those ordinances on the screen one by one, and we'll start at the beginning with IBC. We'll start there and just bring that up on the screen for you. We'll talk through anything that you have questions on. We're not planning to read the full ordinances to you. We're just going to bring those up and work through those as you have questions. This is nothing newly added. This is all just the items that the subcommittee has recommended for approval. And then if we get to the end of each ordinances, when you go, we're going to move and make a motion on each of those different codes. And we do have a recommended motion option for you on that short little staff report that we had at the beginning of the packet. With that, if we don't have any questions, I'm going to pass off to Ian. I'm going to bring up the IBC ordinance real quick. Should be able to see that on both your screens to the left and to the right. I'm going to zoom in as close as I can get so I can be as large for all of you to be able to see.
So as Margie stated, we do have the ordinance up here. A lot of the first sections are just basically saying that we're adopting the 18. That's the administrative sections of the IBC. So Of course, under gas, we went to the UPC 2018. She's just gonna start scrolling down pages slowly. If there is something that catches your eye, or if you have any questions that you know of, please ask. I'll be more than happy to do my best to answer those for you. So, and you should have it. You should have received this in the packet that you had too.
We do have one section highlighted here in the IBC that originally the subcommittee had amended to talk about the use of existing structures. After we move from this code, we are going to move into the International Existing Building Code. So we do have a question for you here of if we're adopting the IEBC, if we want to actually remove this amendment or keep it as is. So I'll leave that up on the screen a little bit bigger for you guys to review that piece if we want to keep that or if we want to remove that amendment.
And just a little clarification on that, when we were going through these amendments, we had not yet accepted the IEBC in its entirety.
Does this have to do with the sprinkle systems on occupancy?
I don't believe this one does. I'm trying to read it, I'm sorry.
It looks like it's basically just saying that if it's legal today, it's, you know, it's occupiable today, it's occupiable in the future, unless you change until you change occupancy or do significant renovation, I think is what. Is
Yes,
that
I
right?
believe Mr. Renz is correct.
Is there something in the existing, was there a section in the existing building code that,
Well, there's an issue with if I'm saying this right, if there's a bar and it has 300 occupancy, it's gonna have to be sprinkled. Well, that's gonna bring the VFW and the Moose Lodge. The VFW can't withstand that.
but it would be,
That's what I'm
but it
concerned
would
with.
be compliant today?
Right away, if the code is adopted, it would have to be compliant or meet.
Go up to the podium.
I think that this is saying that it wouldn't have
No, I'm
to
not
be.
saying about this. That's what I'm concerned with when it comes up.
Yeah,
So I'm Rodney Rexwinkle, I'm commercial plan reviewer for the city and stuff. So what this does is before we didn't have an IEBC code. So this was a section in the IBC that Salina adopted saying that what the IEBC does now, this was our IEBC, basically. This has nothing to do with the fire code amendment you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, no, to answer your question, no, this is not anything to do with that.
Okay.
This was Salina's sliver of what is now an IEBC before IEBC existed. So this is just basically saying, since we didn't have IEBC before, this was IEBC. Now that since we're adopting IEBC, realistically, the reality of this is this amendment's not necessary.
Right.
Because we have a
I see
book
what
now
you're
that
saying.
says,
Right.
this is what we'll follow.
Right.
But to answer your question, no, this has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
This is basically our pre-existing non-conforming statement that is now covered with the IEBC.
But if instead of us just removing it without us talking through it, because this was something that you had agreed to keep the amendment at the beginning of the IBC subcommittee, we kept it in the ordinance for now so that you all could look at this together and say, okay, now that we have actually now talked about adopting the IEBC and we're going to move to that here next, do we want to keep this amendment or would we like to remove that since we're going to be adopting the IEBC?
I think we could remove that. I'd make a motion to remove it.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. I will continue scrolling.
So just a question on the work exempt from permit. It lists all those examples. You don't need to go back up to it. I don't have anything specific, but is there anything that provides something that may not, there's so many examples up there, but it still can't cover everything. Is there still an exemption in there or something that's as exempt from permit as approved by the building official or something like that? Is there a statement?
If you want to go back to that, Margie, I believe that's in the description, authority having jurisdiction. So, I mean, and these aren't just examples, these are what are exempt from a permit. It's pretty much all inclusive to that, but I do believe there is a statement in there.
It was that last section of that first paragraph where it says,
Oh, sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing.
work to be done in any manner without violation of the provision of this code or any other laws or ordinances
Yeah.
of this jurisdiction.
Of this jurisdiction.
Permit shall not be required, so you could have a policy. Sorry. It's at in there where it says shall not be deemed to grant authorization for any work done in any manner of violation of the provision. So to answer your question, Charles, that's where you could come in and say policies, for example, that we had specific items where this particular item that's not on this list, we would grant not needing a permit.
Okay.
As of right now, I don't think we have any policies or anything outside what prescribed in code that would not need a permit. But that leaves the ability for a code or ordinance to specifically name.
Or some unique thing.
Correct,
that
yeah,
is not
someone,
listed
but it would
there
still
that-
take obviously a request and a modification, but as of right now, there's nothing being presented outside the standardized list
Okay.
to not.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure there was an avenue
There
for
is.
not having to get a code if there was something that was really simple, just not listed.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We could have a discussion about that as that states, but the list that we have here is an inclusive list of what is exempt from work without a permit.
Okay.
Or work with a permit, so.
That is the end of the ordinance for the IBC. So at that point, we will open this up for any other questions or comments you guys have about the International Building Code. And if there are no questions or comments, then we would entertain a motion to recommend approval to the City Commission.
You have anything?
I don't want to be the difficult one. I did have one thing on the, there was the reference like 3 pages back, 2 pages back on the required number of plumbing fixtures that was referencing the Uniform Mechanical Code. You scrolled through that.
There's 2 that are just right around the same, and so they look almost exactly the same, other than 28 is the mechanical code in the IBC. And so the subcommittee recommended to remove Chapter 28 and just have a statement here that we're going to the Uniform Mechanical Code, and then 29 is for the Plumbing Code.
Okay. I thought I saw something that was specific to the number of fixtures.
Maybe I'm in the wrong spot.
There.
Plumbing.
That looks
Okay.
correct.
Okay. All right.
I will say, as all of you know, that, I mean, I know it took about 10 minutes to scroll through all these amendments, but we did away with a lot of amendments because they are now code. So this was a much larger list.
I'd make a motion to recommend the adoption of the 2018 International Building Code as presented in the draft ordinance to the City Commission.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
All right. gonna start. Sorry, I wish I could zoom in a little bit more on this. So we're gonna go into the National Electric Code, which is not 2018, it's a 2017. Let me get as close as I can. Too close.
It's coming there. It was the beginning of the packet was the code.
Thank you. My eyes aren't what they used to be.
And that is the National Electrical Code amendments.
And once again, other than the administrative part that has to be grammatically changed from like some of them from authority having jurisdiction to building official and things like that, this was a very short amendment section.
there's one sentence on section 5 that I was questioning. Section 5, 80.27 under inspectors qualifications, it says deleted. What was can you explain what that was or what that?
Annex H. I do not have NEC in front of me to know what Annex H is.
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling up the minutes of the meetings. Feel free.
So, 2017 National Electric Code, Annex H, Administration and Enforcement, Section 8027, addresses the inspector's qualifications. It's a non-mandatory part of the NEC, intended to provide model language for local jurisdictions. And basically what it is it says that electrical inspectors' requirements. This section outlines the necessity, qualifications, experience, and potential examination requirements for individuals authorized to perform electrical inspections. Certifications that often references specifications. Talks about some fees that were involved with doing those. And then it also details the scope of the inspector's authority and responsibilities. What it does is in essence, in and of itself says if you don't have these listed qualifications, you're not deemed an electrical inspector by NEC. Is what it says.
So that's wrote into the new code.
Well, the annex.
That's why this is deleted.
No, it's deleted because what it would be is basically if, and I'm going to take liberty and say, if us as an inspector didn't have that particular qualification,
Right.
we wouldn't be recognized by that section of code to be an electrical inspector. So it would limit to, only people that could be electrical inspectors for the city of Salina is not having, or if you had that particular certification.
Right.
Not all of us have that certification, so therefore it's taken out, just because, if you looked at it with IB, they're all that way. If you don't have the plumbing, you couldn't be able to do plumbing if you don't have.
Right.
And so that's why that particular section was deleted, Charles.
Okay.
So I do have a question on the expiration of permits, and I suppose this applies to all the codes, not just this one, and this may not be the correct time to bring it up. But we have, limits on when they expire, and so forth, okay? So the catch-22 is there, 188 days out, the permit expires, we've had rough inspections, and that's the end of it. There's no follow-up from there. So they go on to finish that house, move into that house, no more inspections are there because there is now an expired permit that nobody follows up on.
No, that would fall into the category as you had an expired permit, and then if you were continuing to do work, you would be doing work without a permit.
Correct. But I think the city's missing they're letting that go. I know of two examples from this past year where permits expired, people finished the job, they moved into the house. Yes, they did it without a permit because the permit was expired. The city had the permit, says, hey, we're going to do this remodel project. Okay, we got rough inspections done, permit expires, and that's the end of it. It seems like there should be a little more of a check and a balance there before that permit. When that permit expires, we need to go do a site visit. What's the condition of this property? Where are we at on this? Because the city's just, just for lack of a better phrase, clearing their system. Okay, that's expired. We're done with it. Forget it.
So what we currently do right now is the permit extends after every time an inspection occurs. So let's say you have that rough-in. We then pushed out 180 days from that rough-in inspection, give them 6 extra months. When it comes up for expiration, the system will automatically send the permit issuer a month before expiration saying, hey, your permit's going to expire. Please call us for an inspection. Once it comes up for expiration, our permit techs get notified. We then reach out again to the permit holder and say, hey, call us in for an inspection. Do that at any time. The permits don't just go away. They're still in our system. We have to manually tell them, yeah, we want to close this for expiration so that we're not just closing the permit.
That's the key word. Close it for expiration.
Yep.
The
So we
permit's
don't,
done.
well, we don't close
gone.
it. We don't close it until we hear something. So we at least reach out at least twice and ask for an update on those. And if we don't, then we don't actually close it. It's marked as inactivity expiration, but it's not closed. We still have it open so that anybody could call in at that point and we could go out and do an inspection.
Yeah, well, if the people don't call in and say, hey, we want this, we want you guys to come do our inspection, you're giving up authority there to regulate that construction, I believe, the way it sits presently.
I always thought that it was 180 days of inactivity is when it expired, not just 180 days. So
Yeah. So it continues to update throughout the life cycle of the
you're
permit.
180. So every time
It
you have an
just-
inspection, you got a new 180 days.
Yep.
Yes.
So it takes 180 days of inactivity.
Right. And I know of 2 cases last year where that happened, and that's the end of it. The conversation's over, permit's done, we finished our job, we moved into our thing, it's over. Just,
How did they get a CO?
they didn't. The permit got closed. They didn't need one.
It's
They
not
did, but they didn't.
Well, it's not that they didn't
So,
need one.
I mean,
And it's-
just something I thought I'd bring up. It's a little catch-22 in there that I noticed. Like I said, I didn't know if this was the appropriate time to have that conversation, but it's no different than doing work without a permit, but it's like it's being permitted to happen, even though we know it's happening.
Yeah, Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community Development Services. We don't know it's happening.
Yeah.
So when people call in and tell us that there's that inactivity happening or somebody moving in when they shouldn't, the same way when somebody tells us somebody's doing work without a permit, those types of things allow us to then go and deal with disciplinary action for the contractor, to deal with legal actions against the homeowner, whatever that situation is. I think what we're saying is, from a purely operational perspective, I mean, outside of sending an inspector to camp out in someone's driveway, we've called everyone on the permit. Once, twice, what's going on? There are a lot of things that could have happened besides somebody moving into that house or the garage getting finished. 2 people went their separate ways, they chose not to finish the project, they ran out of cash, whatever that is. So, I mean, we try to keep an eye on those things, and that's why we don't let them completely fall off our radar.
Yeah.
But there really isn't a better way to enforce on that. I mean, what wouldn't go over well is us knocking on people's door going, hey, what happened? So we try to put people in that position that they need to self-report that they're not doing the project anymore. Also, the contractors could say something too.
Maybe it just needs to be watched a little closer based on the permit itself. So one example that I know of was a house that had all roughs inspections done, permit expired, and that was the end of the conversation.
So 2 phone calls we would have made.
Yeah.
And
with no
if-
answer or whatever reason. I mean, I'm just bringing this as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it seems like a whole.
I mean, we can try,
Yeah.
but I would really appreciate it if any of you ever see something like that and you've got concerns, because you're right, it is a safety issue. But we're a fairly large community. We are tracking them, but that enforcement gets very hard in those situations. What you're saying is someone chose not to call in and have further inspections.
Right.
That's not illegal. What is illegal is then going on beyond that without your permits. So that other part, we're not ignoring it. We're doing the best that we can. But if you see something like that, and we are always trying to keep an eye on things. We have inspectors out there. If we hear something or we see activity maybe where it shouldn't be.
It seems like, you know, at least, I mean, if it's a small little, put a furnace and air conditioner in, it's one thing. But if it's particularly like a complete rewire, redo a whole house, that should be a physical check. Hey, what's the status of this house? We 180 days ago did all these rough inspections. They've not called for any finals. We're not just going to close this. We need to at least go see where the state of this place is. You know, it could be a hazard that nobody's been there in 180 days, and so then we have a safety issue for whatever reason, and or it could be somebody moved in there without getting their inspections. You know, I don't. Yeah.
No, I think that's something that this body could discuss further. I don't know if it belongs in building code. That could be a resolution that you adopt to direct staff to change that policy, but I think it's worth probably a deeper discussion. And we could look into what it takes to actually enforce that. I also probably have to talk with legal about, you know, if we even have a right to, I mean, we could make contact, but without being allowed on the property, we don't have a right to be in that property. So there's some other things that kind of go along with that. I mean, we're allowed to inspect because somebody invites us in.
Yeah.
So if they're like, well, I'm not letting you back
Permit gives
in.
you, in my opinion, gives you permission to go there because they applied and said, yeah, hey, we're doing this. We need you guys here.
Well, I mean,
so,
that would also
yeah.
come with our attorneys confirming that, because
Yeah,
often
yeah.
we would have been there once, but
Yeah.
if they're saying we don't want you back in, so if that's something the body wants and you want to direct staff to do some more research about that and investigate that as a policy, we could do that. But as Margie mentioned, our current policy is we watch those permits. When we hit that 180-day mark, we try and make 2 points of contact through phone and email. If we don't hear anything, it's put into a list of inactive but not completely deleted. And then if somebody calls in, we can figure out what to do with it from there.
So most of these cases that would involve something like this would be remodel jobs and not new construction, because new construction, if you don't go to the end, you don't get a certificate of occupancy, correct?
Correct.
So this would be basically remodel jobs or additions or something like this where there's already a homeowner there, or could
Well,
be
and I suppose it could
potential.
even be a new permit. I mean, for a new build, it gets, let's call it 80% down the way, and they don't call in for those last pieces.
Not on a new construction, though.
No, they shouldn't be able to move in. Have
Right.
they moved in? I don't know. Hopefully we'd catch them on utilities and a few other things of some of those things getting hooked up. But it's typical, yes.
So there is typically that people have moved in without a certificate of occupancy?
Well, I
into a
can't
new
say that
addition?
that's never happened. That's what I'm saying. I mean, is it possible?
So typically we do find that when someone actually needs to go get a mortgage for that home, the title work actually checks for that certificate of occupancy and calls our office, and we supply that to them. If someone's not going through a lender, that seems to be sometimes where we catch those, and we have caught those in the past and go out and do a final inspection and then get them a certificate of occupancy at that point. But that's where it tends to catch some of these if maybe they've had a final but they didn't pass, and then they go have a second final after their lender calls in and says, hey, we need a certificate of occupancy, and we say we don't have one because they haven't passed final, and then we get that call saying let's get that final inspection scheduled and passed.
Okay, well, that clears up a little bit for me. Thank you.
I would agree, though, that doesn't really seem like a NEC item. That just seems like a policy of following up on a dead permit or whatever, so.
Yeah.
Well, staff can look into it a little bit more, maybe come back with some options that, because right now we do follow up on them, but it sounds like what we're hearing is maybe a different course might be something that this commission wants.
I would question if it's the responsibility of this board to set that policy for how you guys do that. I think but what Ryan brings up is just a good point of, hey, it happens, it's a safety issue, bring it to your attention, and if a permit goes dead, then, I think it's just more of a concern for permits going dead, things getting completed, not being done correctly, so.
Understood.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Great, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
I think this issue would be not so much after permit, but the fact that there are plenty of construction going on out there without permits. More than this is what's happening here with
Same line.
getting a permit and then not finishing through on it. And that's hard to regulate. And
At least they tried to do it right to start with.
yeah, they tried. Yeah, they got to try to get a permit. But you have a lot of construction out there that doesn't have a permit. So it's one of those deals where how much do you police when it comes to safety and everything?
Agreed.
I'll note that whenever we do get a call for a work without a permit, we do send an inspector out. We have a violation that's literally called work without a permit, and we'll send out an inspector and see if there's work being done without a permit, and then we'll write a violation notice and make sure that they get a permit in so that we can inspect it. So we do have that process pretty well figured out, as long as when people see something, they say something and let us know. They can call the office, or if you don't want to call, you can do it online on our report a concern process as well. But absolutely.
In that process, when you do catch somebody and you tell them, that you do not have a permit, what authority does the building services have as far as being able to make sure that this happens? I mean, does it get the police involved, or how far does it go?
So since it's all under Chapter 8 with the building codes of what work requires a permit, we go off of that and write a violation notice off of Chapter 8 that says that you did work without a permit, that you're going to have a permit fee, as well as you need to apply for your permit, you need to get those in, have that inspected. And then we keep a building inspector connected to that case, and they are the one that writes that violation, make sure that they follow up after how many days, they re-inspect, make sure that permit gets in, issued, inspected, and then once it's all the way closed out, then that violation gets closed out.
So once the inspector does his write-up, is there any teeth in it as far as people?
Rodney has great experience with this, so I'll let him speak.
So to answer your question, yes, there's teeth. Unfortunately, it's not ours. What happens is, so I will go in, work without a permit, whatever the violation is. I write up the violation, give them usually 30 days to correct the violation. At that point, the only thing we can do is it gets referred to court. It goes to municipal court, and then it becomes a municipal court enforcement. But yes, there's teeth. It's just unfortunately it's not our mouth to bite with.
I didn't think it would be your teeth.
Yeah, there is enforcement, and it falls under the same line. So something I do actually have done quite a bit is no utilities. It's under the maintenance code, but it's the same similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a timeline. If they don't do it, we go to court. The judge comes in and says either get out or get utilities. Those are your options.
Right.
And it would be the same thing. Either get a permit or quit building.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, your house is in disrepair. Now it's an unsafe structure. Get out. And that's. It's the courts that do that.
So
and yes, it does happen.
So does the inspection department, once they get their foot in the door as far as finding out you didn't have a permit and everything, are they able to go completely through the home as far as inspection and be able to write up everything that is wrong? No. Not so much the work that's being done, but
because
the existing house itself.
Because existing non-conforming is a thing. Mm-hmm. And so we can only, and same thing, if you go to do some work in that house, we can't necessarily go back and make you change the bathroom because you're putting a new wall in the living room. It's the area of which you're working is what we enforce to current code. So if it's existing non-conforming, no, we don't do a full site walk if we find you working without a permit, unless we're doing an inspection of the living room. Mm-hmm. We also see now there's work being done in the bathroom, then at that point we can go because that's additional work without a permit.
See, and this was a problem. The reason I bring this up, this was a problem many, many years ago when I was in the trade, and we had to call in for all the water heater inspections. And one of the inspectors, of course no longer, that's way in much water underneath the bridge, he would go in, and he was a plumbing inspector. He would go in and do that, and once he did that, his flashlight started going everywhere, and he would start writing up the homeowners on deficiencies in the plumbing. And then we, the owners of the business, would be getting nasty calls from the homeowners of, why did you send this guy in here? Now he tells me I have to do $2,000-$3,000 worth of work to bring my plumbing up to code. So I was wondering, how far that goes as far as.
From my perspective, and unless I'm directed otherwise to do differently, if I'm sent out on a work without a permit, I am looking at the work without a
work.
permit. I don't magically, and even if I shine the light somewhere else because there's new paint, oh yeah, I didn't do anything there, I just repainted the wall. And unless there's obvious, signs of work, I'm sorry, I don't believe in expanding my authority beyond what I feel
Right.
comfortable in court testifying that I legally could do. And this is the area that required the permit. This is what I was inspecting. And anything existing non-conforming, we already recognize as acceptable anyway. It'd be tough, unless now if you redid that plumbing as fresh pipe, that's different. But I'm not gonna just, that's obviously black ABS, it's been there for 30 years.
Right.
It's not right to today's standard, fix it. It wasn't right yesterday, but if you didn't remodel your house either, it's still
Right.
the same condition.
Right. And it was a catch-22 as far as them doing this, because of the fact now you've got people that would say, hey, I'm not having an inspector come in my house, and you were having a lot of work
And it
done
leads to
without
additional work without a permit for that reason.
permits. Yeah.
Understood.
Let me just say that when our inspectors are out on inspections, that we do have a line of sight rule. So if I went to go look at a water heater and I noticed that the chimney had several large holes in it that were venting the said gas appliances, then we would absolutely be writing them up on that.
That's understandable, yeah.
So, and then just to go back a little bit further, so if we went to a residence for a work without a permit and it was something that was inside of their house, unless they invite us into that house to take a look at that work, we absolutely cannot demand that we enter that residence to inspect said work. And I will go back to the permits on that too. So just because somebody has a permit and they had a rough inspection and then we don't hear from them for 100 days, we can make that phone call and ask for that inspection, but by no means can we go onto another person's property and demand that we get into that residence to do an inspection. So people do have property rights, and that goes all the way from that to our property maintenance code and everything else. I mean, people do have property rights just because we have a permit or we have a phone call of somebody with a complaint, or we have a legitimate something like, hey, you haven't had an inspection in 6 months. If they don't invite us into that residence, then we cannot barge our way in.
So to circle back to the National Electric Code, I don't know if we have any other pieces there. I'm not saying this isn't great discussion. It is, and I'd love to keep going. But just because we had this one open,
I move to recommend adoption of the
Second.
2017 National Electric Code as presented in the draft ordinance to the City Commission.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now we're going to move into the International Existing Building Code. This is a very short section. It's literally just what's on my screen. So I'll let you look that over, and if you have any questions, we can go through those.
Any discussion?
Yeah, any discussion?
I move to recommend adoption of the, bear with me, I'm sorry, losing track here. The International Existing Building Code, the 2018, as presented in the draft ordinance to the City Commission.
I'll second.
Yeah, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Now we will move on to the International Residential Code, the IRC. Please feel free to tell me if I scroll too fast or too slow. And that is the end of the IRC ordinance.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Hold on. Section 20 should not be in there. That's the swimming pool section we adopted. The
Right.
USPSHC, HTC, uniform swimming pool and spa and hot tub code.
Correct.
That's the one that's listed, that's the one that's listed here on the front page.
Yes.
So
It should be separate.
we'll take out section 20 before we would take that forward. If somebody could, when you make that motion, if you could just say removing section 20 from the presented ordinance, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 2 of the Salina Code by repealing the existing sections 8-1-2-1 through 8-1-2, AG 105.2, adopting the 2018 edition of the International Residential Code for one and two family dwellings by reference and adopting local amendments. And we'll be taking
Section 20.
Section 20 out of the IRC building code.
A second.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, here is the 2018 Uniform Mechanical Code. That is the end of the ordinance for the mechanical code.
Discussion? I move to recommend adoption of the 2018 Uniform Mechanical Code as presented in the draft ordinance to the City Commission.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And next, the uniform plumbing code. That is the end of the Uniform Plumbing Code ordinance.
I have a question on section 14, number 807.3, domestic dishwashing machines in the 2018 UPC is deleted. Can you tell me what was deleted?
Give me 1 second.
807.3 says domestic dishwashing machine. No domestic dishwashing machine shall be directly connected to a drainage system or food waste disposer without the use of an approved dishwasher air gap fitting on the discharge side of the dishwashing machine. That has been decided that they are built into those pretty regularly now. Almost anything that uses hardline wire is, especially if it has a UPC label on it. And the garbage disposal would actually act as an air gap. So that has been taken out through the last 3 code cycles, actually.
Okay. That I was not aware of. So, thank you. I move that we adopt the 2018 edition of the Uniform Plumbing Code by reference and adopting the local amendments.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, to the Uniform Swimming Pool, Spa, and Hot Tub Code, the USPHTC. I've got that up on the screen for you all. This would be where we're going to add in that section 20 pieces.
So on section 2, where it says the above ground barrier is deleted, the previous one that we looked at had like a dozen
Yeah,
items.
the amendments, because we amended that because for seasonal pools, we have a height requirement of 48 inches on the barrier instead of 54. There is a large discussion within the subcommittee about that, and if we raise that to 54 inches for seasonal pools, we would have to go through about half of this town's pools and tell them they couldn't have a pool anymore. So we left the seasonal pool barrier fencing at 48 inches, and that's why that was deleted in lieu of the new one, which calls for the 6-foot barrier for permanent pools above or below ground. But it just covered the basics of a pool, the above ground barrier for any pool. So that was deleted and it was brought back with permanent pools, 6-foot fencing, seasonal pools, 48-inch fencing or barrier around it.
Correct.
Is there a maximum depth on the seasonal pool that this 48 inches would fall under?
The maximum depth to be considered a pool is 24 inches. If you had just a kiddie pool that you bought from Kmart, that's about this deep, it's not considered a pool.
So the minimum depth is 24
Minimum
inches.
depth is 24 inches for, to be considered a pool. The maximum depth of a pool, is that what you were asking?
Yeah, if you have a seasonal pool that, say, is a very large pool that, you know, they're only going to use for the season and then take it down, and it happens to be 4 foot in depth, then we have an issue with kids getting over the 4-foot fence and getting into the pool. Possible drowning.
Well, the code has always been 48 inches on a seasonal pool. You can also have a barrier fencing around the top edge of the seasonal pools. But we decided to keep with the standard that we have had through the last couple code cycles of seasonal pools have 48-inch barriers.
Well, and I think we talked about too, it'd be hard to police that with so many people throwing those things up, you know.
Yeah, it's difficult to police that as it is. And like I said, we've already granted permits to hundreds of people in the past with the 48-inch barrier so to change it at this point, we would have to
Right.
go back on all of those permits that we issued.
Right.
The big concern when we did that was making sure we got the 6-foot fences around the in-ground pools, which we had about 4 or 5 at the time that were new pools that didn't have any fence around them.
And we
They
also,
didn't have any fence at all?
No. And now they do. And the code hasn't even passed yet.
I'm gonna say, if your insurance company knew that, you'd be dropped like a hot potato.
well, and there is also an amendment that we have for power safety covers being used in lieu of barrier fencing. We are not going to allow that also. So that was voted on by the BAB subcommittee
That's how they were getting by with no
without the
fence.
fencing.
And when we had that subcommittee, we decided that that just wasn't gonna fly because you forget to close it.
Right.
I mean, there's no protection.
And they're also only good for, even the most expensive brands of them are only good for 5 years. So actually maintaining that they have a compliant cover would be cumbersome also for us.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the 2018 edition of the Uniform Swimming Pool and Spa and Hot Tub Code by reference and adopting local amendments.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. The next thing we're going to talk about is our International Fire Code. We do not have an ordinance for you to review at this point. We are still working on drafting that just to make sure that we are all on the same page. We want to make sure our fire marshal has the time to look over that ordinance. But we do know that there are some questions about the International Fire Code. So we have both our fire marshal, Joe Kvasik, here, as well as Rodney Rexwinkle, which is one of our subject matter experts on the IFC. So I'm going to bring up the section of the PowerPoint that we talked about with the public for the International Fire Code, and just open that up to questions that you all might have about the International Fire Code that's been presented so far. I'm going to get to the point that I know that people are. That's not there. I don't know if it's there, Rodney. Give me 1 second. This one? No. Here it is.
So this is the section where, Mr. Frazier, your comment earlier in the IBC would come into play with the retroactive of the A2 assemblies. So this retroactive came about from the Station nightclub fire from 2003, where they had 100 people killed and 230 people injured in that incident. And that was in a bar with a band and things like that. And so they've been working on this since then. And it actually came from a recommendation, the first recommendation from NIST, after they did their study on it. And NIST is actually a little more they would rather it be regardless of size, that everything be retroactively sprinkled. And the IFC and ICC decided not to go quite as hard as what the NIST recommendation was. And so that's why they ended at the 100 mark there. Now, for us, we've discussed back and forth. If this moves forward, it's not, by January 1st, they have to have something done. Many other cities have adopted this and have given periods to give enough time for something to kind of go in there. This, and with the radio coverage, they normally give about 24 months so that you can have some sort of, you can budget for it and kind of get things underway, fundraising, whatever they need to do. The majority of our bars and restaurants that this would affect, I guess the majority of them are already either sprinkled or they don't have this occupant load. There are a couple in town that we have recognized, and the ones that you were referring to are the ones that we've recognized also. But any other?
I have a question. How does that relate to the existing building code then with that requirement?
So this is all in Chapter 11, which is construction requirements for existing buildings. And so that's where it becomes the retroactive, because it's in the existing buildings. And they refer to it in the actual code as a retroactive code, because most of ours, very few are actually retroactive, but this would be one of them. That as model code, it is retroactive.
But is it only for restaurants that like seat X amount of people?
It's
That is a whole bar, because it's just bars, it's not restaurants, right?
So it is an A2. So where alcoholic beverages are consumed in an A2 occupancy is where this kicks in at. And an A2 occupancy includes restaurants
Right.
and everything. Banquet halls. So if we're using the VFW example, if they have one side that's the banquet hall, and
Right.
the other side, it's still an A2.
Right.
Both sides would be. Casinos, nightclubs, restaurants, taverns, and bars is what A2 falls under. So it's not just restaurants and bars. It's
Right.
a little more than that, and it could just be a bar with
Right.
a larger capacity.
My concern is like the VFW, I don't think they could withstand having to be retrofitted with a fire sprinkler system. I mean, the VFW does a lot of good things, and I hate to see something like that be put on them. I am very good friends with the colonel that used to run the VFW, and I've done a lot of work for him that I've donated, and I think it's a great thing that they do. And, the things they provide out there, like the once a month breakfast, things like that. And I think that's usually when they would have that many people in there, because usually there's probably not 50 people in there.
Right.
There's probably not 25. But there is a few times throughout the month, like their breakfast and, maybe if they're having something else like that they would have that many people.
Right.
I think something we talked about at the public meeting, because this also came up, was that today we're talking through this and I think getting feedback, but then we have to bring the ordinance back to you. I think between now and bringing the ordinance back, it would behoove us to figure out how many of these facilities we have and trying to get an idea of how they're going to impact. I think one of the things that was offered up during the public meeting last week was also looking at, really a full assessment of those facilities. Are they a fully A2? Are they not? And just trying to understand the impact, because I think that's, as a board, what you're figuring out is if we adopt this, what is the impact on the community while
Right.
also trying to keep people safe. So if that's something amenable to you, that's something we could do.
The other thing that we had discussed a little bit is the way occupancy is figured. Most of the time, it's figured gross, and we could go in and do a net and start, the bar that's affixed to the ground. Well, we take out that square footage and, but I think their occupant load for the VFW is still high enough that we wouldn't be able to get it under that 100 because of the
I don't know what the
conference
bar is,
hall
but
behind or whatever.
isn't the whole place like 300?
Yeah, let's say, and it's, the occupant load's 300 or more, not 100 on this, right? The way I'm reading the code, right?
Yes.
Right, but it
So if
It
you got the occupant
changes.
load
What, it looks to
not
me,
artificially suppressed, actually realistically.
Yeah, VFW, I think their load is like 300.
Right, so if we go in and, like Joe was saying, because one of the suggestions I had too is we can also look at saying, okay, what is your realistic size that you need to have occupied by people? And then look at how much would it cost to build a rated separation, splitting it in half, where there's no intermingling between those two. The big breakfast, fine. If they go outside, go back in the outside from a separate, where we legitimately separate the occupancy. And have the other one be a B or so. Figure something out or what. There's ways without actually sitting down and looking at each facility, because I think there was only a couple, like we talked about, there's only a couple that we could identify offhand that this would affect. And the nice thing about that is with only being a couple, that gives us the opportunity to go specifically to those locations and say, okay, what can be done to try to avoid this, if that's what's necessary.
yeah, it seems
The whole thing is obviously we don't want to have a situation where we do nothing, and now we're the case study for why the next code cycle gets stricter.
Right, I understand that. but
It's that balancing act.
I think my issue is that, it's retroactive on things that have been here for the last 60, 75 years, like the Moose and things like that. I think that's, there are organizations that I just don't think that can take that kind of hit and still, be viable to the city of Salina.
so,
So with the occupant load, so it is 300 or more. Where the 100 kicks in is new construction. Anything A2 occupancies and all stories below where the fire area exceeds 5,000 square feet has an occupant load of 100 or more, or is located on a story other than the level of exit discharge. An automatic sprinkler system has to be installed.
Well, what if they cut their occupancy level to 280, 275?
so.
That's gonna-
So typically, in my experience, is in an A2 occupancy, we get to at least not necessarily determine, but propose what that occupant load is. So like in the case of a restaurant where it's all seating, we can either do a seating layout that shows that it is, we can seat, 98 people.
Right.
Or we can do a calculation that shows we got 15 square feet per person. And so I think that if there's a way to work through that, what I would suggest is, are there other alternatives if something like that is prohibitive, for within a certain reasonable area, could we increase exiting? Could we require them to put in more exit doors or more exit signage, or is there other early notification? Are there other things that could be done that might not be quite so prohibitive?
Because part of the problem is out there, if you cut off that banquet room in the back, where you would cut that off, the kitchen is kind of in that section if you've been out there. And it would cut, all the bathrooms are towards the front. So you would have no bathroom facilities in that back part.
Which, other than having to access it from the outside, code-wise, we're okay. I mean, convenience-wise, yeah, no, I understand. Code-wise, we'd still be okay, because as long as you can travel less than 500 feet, you're good there.
But those
We're just trying to help
spaces-
figure out.
Those spaces don't have to be considered part of the occupant load. I mean, if you're basing it on the area of the building.
Yeah,
The
so-
bathrooms area would be an
Yeah, no,
accessory.
I think he's talking about physically, if we build a separation wall, like I'd mentioned, then that place, they don't have easy, direct access to the bathroom without going outside. The other thing is, like Charles was mentioning, is without knowing how the original occupant load of that building was established, was it just
Right.
this many square feet, this many people? We don't know. If we come in and say, the versus 15 square foot per person, it's now, here's your chairs, here's your tables, here's the seating layout, we're only gonna get this many people, because that's all we have seats for.
Right.
Then that is an arguable, from the perspective of VFW, of why it should be suppressed. What we historically haven't done, and we are not comfortable doing, for multiple reasons, is come in and say, well, I pinky promise I'm only going to have 280 people in here. That 3 days later is 350 for a wedding. I mean, it's because it just doesn't. A, it's unenforceable. B, it's not realistic. Because it happens.
Well,
all
that
the
can
time.
happen in a place that has
And it does.
50.
Yeah,
and they
it
can
does.
have 150.
Yes,
I mean,
and that's why historically we don't do that, because we have those exact situations. So like I said, and that's the nice thing, like I said earlier, is by having only a handful in town, we can try to work with each individual one, and with a 24-month, 2-year provision of compliance, it gives time to try to figure something out.
right.
Yeah, well, we're not blind and deaf to the plight of some businesses. Like I said, and in my mind, the fact that we're only impacting a couple is actually a good thing, because that means we can focus on those couple and, see what can be done to help avoid the substantial cost of doing this.
Yeah, I just, like it to be looked into and brought before the board before we make a decision.
Before we get a draft ordinance, we can meet with at least the VFW and probably get in contact with some of the other ones. The VFW, do you by chance know approximate the banquet hall, what that occupant load would be back there?
No, I don't, but I can find out and let
I
it
can-
in, though.
With that, I think we could be pretty close if we change from gross to net to getting under that 300. But it's just it's gonna take time to get in there and take a look at it.
Right.
And maybe a design professional would be cheaper to have everything laid out, and before you do that sprinkler system, have a design professional. Maybe we can say this area over here isn't included in the your occupant calculation is a lot different. Maybe there's more storage that would,
Right.
would
Or
bring that
maybe
down.
you build a storage room.
Yeah, well, it's kind of separated. The front part to the west side is pretty much office. Then behind that, there's a small room with some bathrooms off of it. The other side, the bar is not very big. And once you get through the bar, there's a pretty good-sized kitchen, and the rest of it is just that banquet hall.
See, and that's our challenge, without knowing the original, how it's originally
Right.
calculated. We may, honestly, I've not been in there, so I can't speak. But it may be realistically, when we walk in there, start doing the calculations, and we hit 280 naturally.
Right.
And they don't have to do anything.
Right.
But till that happens, it's a tough,
I'm
and then
just-
part of, like I mentioned earlier, is, the other part is, we're already planning on having
Right.
a delayed compliance window to get it in. And, so,
What I would suggest would be to have the VFW representative and any of the other ones that you know, contact Daisy or Development Services and schedule a site visit, and we can come out and take a look at it and kind of, because neither one of us have been
Right.
in the building for a long time or ever, and we can kind of try and come up with some prescriptive
Right. Well, that works for
measure
me.
there.
I'd just like somebody to kind of look into it a little bit, and I just, hate to put a lot of burden on that organization and some of the others.
Yep.
Commissioners, our plan at this point is to we're going to ask you to look at your schedules, not right at this exact moment, but look at maybe a meeting in 2 weeks from now. So that would give us enough time to, first of all, pull a list together of any ones that we can find that would be over that 300 threshold, and potentially set up a site visit and work through that with the VFW. And then at that point, we'd also have a draft ordinance for you, and we could discuss that further too.
I'm good for 2 weeks.
I would just like to see the draft ordinance on something like that well prior to the meeting, so if there was any other discussion, that we wouldn't be kind of on the hook to get it approved in that same meeting, if that was.
That's a good idea.
We can do that.
So the other major difference in this is going to be the remoteness requirements and Appendix D. So in the past, Appendix D only showed remoteness under industrial areas, but your single family and the complexes or developments would refer back to that section. So that's where I think before there was a lot of confusion on it. Now in the 18, they have taken it, and instead of being D 104.3, which is commercial and industrial developments, now under multifamily, they have it listed as D 106.3, and under 1 and 2 family developments, it's now D 107.2. So it directly addresses the remoteness for each one of those. It's the exact same wording and everything, but clarifies basically that you still need that remoteness. Now, speaking with the ICC and IFC group, we discussed the remoteness topic in length, and they said when they came up with the half the distance of the diagonal, that is meant and was designed for square and rectangle type lots. We have a few places in town that are not square or rectangle, and determining the half the distance of the diagonal gets pretty difficult sometimes. So we have made a couple suggestions. One of them was, so this part here, the D107, the exceptions, automatic sprinkler systems throughout all dwelling units. At the state level, there's state statute that says that we cannot do that. And then the other exception that is used quite often is the future connection to another access road, or if the development's continuing on, it's going to have 2 or 3 more connections somewhere. But they can at least start up to that 30 number with only one access point. You can go to the next slide. So some of the other options that we've kind of looked into is trying to figure out a distance that would make sense for a minimum on remoteness. So, like right here, number 2, change the remoteness criterion to 300 feet of separation minimum. 300 feet, the way we got that is that's what the city block width on Santa Fe is, and those are a little wider than normal blocks, and so that was 300 feet. So that's kind of where we got that number. Some other cities, what they do is some of them do a case by case. Some of them have raised the number from 30 dwelling units to 50, 75, whatever they deem necessary there. But we have kept the 30 and just reduced the distance to 300 minimum.
I think I'll add to this because it's an interesting subject. It's not just a fire code perspective, but it also impacts platting. And so this is something that the community's been running into the last few years, and we've been noticing, which is one of the reasons we've addressed this in the IFC, is the remoteness component can make development very difficult sometimes, but the safety needs to be there. If you look at this Appendix D, it says you can offset that with sprinklers. Well, sprinklers in Kansas, we can't mandate through plat or through building code, thanks to state statute. So it makes it difficult to have that as an option. We can do it through covenants and a few other things, but it's not the most ideal situation. And really having a secondary access point right then and there is the most optimal. So when we start to get into having that distance component, as Joe said, we looked at other places in the community where we recognized that something is a safe distance, right? If you had some kind of car accident here or a downed tree, what's a far enough distance that could all be dealt with? People could go to that other space and be out of the way and safe enough. And we looked at a large city block like off of Santa Fe is a reasonable distance rather than trying to find this diagonal by the property, which doesn't always make sense. As Joe noted, we did do some research of other communities, and dropping that number or raising that number, which 30 is the magic number in Appendix D, did not get us any safer and doesn't always make it easier either if we don't address the distance component. So we went with the 300 feet or recommending that to the body. And of course, you'd be able to see that in the draft code, but also defining some of the conditions in which the access may not be required. This is also an interesting piece. There is discretion for the fire marshal within Appendix D, but often when you get to a decision-making body like the Planning Commission, their number one concern is keeping that community or that new neighborhood safe, and it puts the fire marshal in a unique and difficult position and the Planning Commission of going, when do you give and take on something like this? So the other situation is also offering more criteria that when we do have some flexibility in that second entrance, what is the reasons for that? Is there a levee? Is there an airport, the river channel? There has to be some reason. And so a combination of giving some criteria and a more reasonable distance rather than just the diagonal and half of that starts to create something that's also more predictable for developers. If you go to the next slide, Margie. As I mentioned, sprinklers are difficult. So basically, it's the same code you're going to see, and Joe can walk you through the rest of this, but I kind of wanted to hop in because this has been something that's been talked about, especially as we've platted more the last few years. And we've seen this where we have new in our greenfield development, the challenge of meeting this and also maintaining safety. So we'll see where this also works not only in single-family residential, but also multifamily and commercial. So I'll keep popping up and down, but Joe's got it.
So what I would like to see would be, if at all possible, we try and stick with the half the distance, but if that's not feasible, then a minimum of the 300 feet kind of be the, a lower criteria for that to where we can fit that in. some places where developments are wanting to go, there's just no other way to make that happen. Like I said, part of this, I believe, for residential sprinklers is an educational issue. Hollywood and the movies and TV don't portray sprinklers as a good thing. You know, they show someone pulls a pull station on a fire alarm and all the sprinklers go off. They are absolutely not connected in any way, shape, or form to that sprinkler system going off.
And it's clean water. Comes
Oh
out.
yeah. It's not black and dirty water coming out. Yeah. The other part is not every sprinkler head goes off when that happens, because a sprinkler head has a bubble in it. That bubble will heat up, expand, break the bulb, and then that one sprinkler head discharges water until the next one builds enough heat to break that one, and then the next one. So they're not a bad thing. It's just unfortunate that we got the state statute that says we can't do that. And in most single-family homes, they're small enough that it's not a significant cost increase compared to what your insurance savings would be, over 4 or 5 years. Most of the time, they pay for themselves. So I guess with that, the 300 feet to us seemed reasonable. The subcommittee, we had a couple discussions on it, and I think we all agreed that 300 feet was a reasonable distance. So, do you have any questions on remoteness? I know there's a lot of discussion on it before.
Well, I understand this is the International Fire Code here we're talking about, but your shirt also says EMS.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel that this particular section of the code applies only to fire. We're talking more of a natural disaster here, where tornado came through, knocked over trees, blocked over the one and only pathway into this neighborhood. Well, 15 houses down the block, somebody's having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. You guys have more to do than just put out fires. So the sprinkler system option does not help in that instance.
Correct.
This is about accessibility for fire, because it's the fire code, but your shirt also says EMS, and that's bigger than just fire here. So I think we need to keep in mind more life safety than just for fire here.
Right, and those
This is
access
accessibility.
roads can also be used by the police department.
Yes.
And things like that, because they have to be designed to hold a 75,000-pound vehicle, which is what our minimum standard for our fire trucks would be that 75,000-pound vehicle. So,
The one thing on that, Ryan, is unfortunately, and I say, this is the only place in code it's addressed at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, it's fire, and the sprinkler section is an exception presented in the fire code.
Yeah.
The only thing
Which
for us is
good
we just
for
can't
fire,
make them
but
do it.
I just think we should also
Yeah.
have in the back of our minds that we're not dealing with
and-
just fire here. This is for access.
Correct, but the
for
unfortunate thing
any
is
sort of an emergency.
we don't unless you want to add to the remoteness requirements.
Right.
We don't have. There's nothing in the code that addresses the EMS side of it. Unfortunately.
yeah.
So you're 100% correct.
Yeah.
That it'd be great if you could say, hey, we want a secondary access regardless because of that reason. But unless we want to amend code adding more to it, which I think is going to be even greater challenge, considering what we've already heard.
I
with,
just
not
feel like we
liking
should
this
have at
one.
least that thought in the back of our heads that this is more than just for fire, even though it's the fire code.
some of the examples would be, was it 2 years ago when the wind came up and took down a bunch of trees, and we were all out running calls, and you'd turn a corner and there'd be a tree down across the road. Well, most of the time you could just back up, turn around, and find an alternate route. But if it came to that situation where it was one way in, I know it doesn't make, it's not a great argument on it, but all of our trucks have chains, chainsaws. We're going to push it, pull it, cut it, you know.
Yeah.
We'll
But
get
that
through.
10 minutes is the difference between life and death in some
Right.
instances. So.
Right. So, devil's advocate is if, you know, the main road's blocked because of a windstorm or ice storm or whatever that's taking limbs or trees or whatever down, power lines, the access road could also be blocked. There's arguments each direction on it, and I completely understand the EMS side also. And that's kind of where this isn't just the fire code or city. It's kind of your guys' direction too as to how you want to see this go. If the 300 feet is appropriate, or if you want to see it more, or, you know, and take it, just take a look at it and think some new development could also have a requirement of less than this. We've had a couple that are just 1 and 2 houses on a development. But take into consideration some of the places that they're looking at building and how we can get access to them. Infilling is nice, but it can also be kind of a disaster on the remoteness side of things.
And one other thing to think about is, I don't know if it's back or forward, Mark, you go where another option that is also available in IFC, and you think about where 300, yeah, it's like, yeah, it'd be great, it sounds good, but one of the other ones is, there's a section in there that talks about the 2 20-foot lanes separated by a 9-foot median along the same line. I mean, that's an acceptable path. But at the same time, let's be realistic. I got two lanes with a 9-foot in between them. I'm 80 feet of width. What's the odds of, a tornado taking out all 80 feet? But that's already also an acceptable secondary, right? So it's, the 300 is okay. It's trying to find that happy medium of, you have some of these really huge diagonal, and it's not the shortest diagonal. It's, you take the worst case diagonal of any particular lot in Salina and you get up around the river, and some of those are huge. But the worst case scenario, some of those diagonals, you may have access roads that are 400 or 500 feet apart based upon that, just because of the weird layout of the land, where in reality, 300, if you have an accident or a fire downtown in Santa Fe, the fire department's already used to, hey, this is our access, we got 3, another way. And so that was where that came up. But there's there's also that section that we already have, it's already in there, that 29 with the 9-foot between the two 29s. So it's that balancing act.
Yeah.
I think a note that I would have on, as far as the residential sprinkling, you had said that, your insurance would more than likely pay for it in 5 years. The thing you got to look at, though, is when it comes to fire sprinkler systems, you have to have backflow prevention. And city code says that backflow prevention has to be tested annually. So you've got the cost of that, plus being able to maintain your system, for leaks and anything else. And it's not aesthetically a good looking as far as having fire sprinkler system in a home, in the walls. So that would be one thing to take into consideration too, that if you decided that go beyond the state statute and say, we're going to have sprinkler systems in residentials, that there would be a lot of added costs to it, basically for maintaining it.
I want to be really,
Residential systems, though, do have different criteria than the commercial, because those can be run off of domestic water. And so there's a much, much lower quantity of water. They can even be self-contained. But with that said, I think that's why I just think there's so many things on the fire code that we talk about that it's worthy of a subcommittee, some further subcommittee discussion before it comes back to this group, so.
I do think it's worth noting, we are not recommending or trying to require residential sprinklers. It is already in Appendix D as an option. We did not want to remove the option. But I will tell you 99.9% of the time, a developer is not going to choose sprinklers. They are going to choose one of the other routes. It's more sustainable, it's easier to plan for, it's easier to cost out, all those things for many of the reasons that both Ben and Ryan, you've noted. Sprinklers aren't optimal, but we didn't want to take that option away from somebody. So I think this option does give some realistic expectations so that we can provide all emergency services in a reasonable way while still being able to provide lots to build homes on in the types of land we have available to do that, keeping people safe, but also not taking all the options off the table. So that was our hope in this approach. But definitely, I want to be real clear, not recommending, and we cannot fully adopt or require residential sprinklers.
And you said you couldn't fully adopt that by
State statute.
By statute, or you can't require it, but you also mentioned that you can't require it by plat. You could only potentially require it by.
So
We can't require it at all. It's offered as an option if they choose to do that, but it has to be done through.
correct, but then we can create, we also have to create a mechanism in which it's maintained, right? So if that's your trade-off, we can't put it in your building permit and we can't put it to your plat. But your plat does adopt covenants in which you as a development are responsible for maintaining and enforcing those covenants. And they're recorded with your plat and against the properties. If it says, we will put in sprinklers, there is a way for us to enforce that, but that is voluntary by the developer to make that choice, and that's one way we can do that. But like I said, most developers are also not going to make that choice because they don't want to deal with the HOA and maintaining in those components. So again, they're going to pick secondary access, but in unique situations, we didn't, again, want to take an option off the table. So.
Charles, you did note that you maybe further IFC discussion on the, or IFC subcommittee discussion on this. These are all things that were discussed at the IFC subcommittees. So, but what we will do before we would come back is, and provide it to you in advance as you have requested, make sure we get that all out to you with advance notice, is put this into a draft ordinance so that you can see it all on one document, review it before you come to the meeting, so that when we meet again, hopefully in 2 weeks, that you can see that and we can have those discussions, as well as discussions we've already had about the other items that Mr. Frazier brought up. Any other thoughts, questions, IFC? Okay. Ian, would you like to mention the 2009 IECC or IECC?
We do have we did keep the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code, and I've been told that we don't have to adopt it since it is already adopted. So.
Yes, you do not have to adopt a new ordinance because it's already been adopted by the last code cycle. So we do not have to adopt that today.
And same with the 2010 Americans with Disabilities Act.
That is all we have for adoption of codes. Staff does have one unfinished or other business item to let the board know about. We are working through some final inspection timing changes with our engineering department, as well as building and fire. A lot of the time, our engineering team under Public Works, they are working earlier in the day or later in the day at the beginning of the week. And so their Friday hours tend to shift a little bit depending on what projects they've got going and with streets department or other projects that they might be working on. Currently, our commercial final inspections are scheduled on Tuesdays and Fridays. So we are going to be sending a notice out to all contractors that we're going to schedule that on Tuesdays and Thursdays instead, just so that we make sure that we're providing the best customer service that we can. What happens right now is maybe our building and our fire teams will go out on Friday, and then engineering might have to catch up on Monday or Tuesday, which could delay a certificate of occupancy being issued. So we would just want to make sure that we're being as resourceful as we can and schedule those all together so we can get everybody on site at the same time. So we'll be scheduling those on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We schedule those at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. But we would do work with the contractors if we need to do something outside of that scope. And then for both residential and commercial final inspections, we're going to start requesting a 2-day notice for those inspections. Not a strict 48 hours, but let's say you call in on a Monday morning, just to make sure we can get everybody on site at the same time. We're going to say the earliest we can get you in is Wednesday morning. Not necessarily a 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. situation, but a morning versus AM, PM situation. So we're going to be sending that out to all the contractors. But before we did that, we wanted to make sure that you all know, just in case someone says anything to you on those pieces. For residential finals, we don't schedule those on a specific day of the week. We won't schedule them on Fridays since we won't have our engineering team always on those days. So they'll schedule Monday through Thursday, just with that 2-day notice period. Any questions about that or why we're doing it? Or
So that would apply to project permits, not standalones?
yes, not standalones, not at all.
Also come out and do electrical inspection whenever you want.
Good.
Yeah, this would just be for new building permits or building permits that you would require multiple people to come out and inspect. So maybe like a large addition, a tenant finish that has multiple people that are going to go out and look. If you're just doing a final electrical or a remodel or something along those lines, no, we will schedule those as they are scheduled now.
And that's just the final inspection.
I think 48 hours in advance when I need an inspection.
Yeah.
We will make an exception for you.
All right. Okay, so that was item number 4, unfinished business. We don't think we had any quasi judicial matters. We did the legislative matters and any administrative items, preliminary discussion items. Then we skipped to 4, public forums 5, nobody. And so I think we're ready for adjournment.
I'd make a move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.